Perfect. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I will do this presentation in a bottom-up kind of way. So I will go from a very particular examples on animals, on like formalizing this problem, which is an inverse problem, source separation or signal enhancement, when you don't have ground truth data. And I think this is also the case when you work on particular music traditions, which in which data is scarce, which they have a very specific setup, and is conditioned on basically an entire different kind of terminology and priors and cultural priors, as is the case of Carnatic or Hindustani music. Yeah, in some sense, working on bioacoustics, it's a bit similar. Like you have people working on, they are experts on, let's say, something that is very similar to music tradition. So you imagine you have an expert in a music tradition, but this music tradition is basically one given species. So there are experts on macaques, they are experts on bats, they are experts on certain bird species, but the people don't really work cross taxa. So people don't really apply things that they learn for a given species to another species. So I don't know if this is the case in musicology, computational musicology, or but there are some lessons I learned that you can leverage if you jump through from one species to the other, from one tradition to the other. I would say there are things that transfer and lessons that are learned, and you don't always have to start from scratch. Yeah, this is one of the cases which I had in trying to denoise signals. So for animals, I rather than doing something very specific to a domain, let's say one bird species or to bats or to something else, I wanted the model that works cross taxa, but I also wanted to see if I can leverage things from the human domain, because in human domain, we have a lot of training data. So there's a lot of like clean speech data from many sources. And in the animal domain, we kind of like lack that. So this is basically animal vocalization denoising. You try to basically enhance the signal that you have. Animals are not usually recorded in studios or on the mobile phones at close distance. So the recordings of animals you find, and you find a lot of diffusion now, trying to synthesize animal signal, and it's usually noisy. So it's you don't find isolated sources. More like animals are, the species are co-occurring with each other, individuals the same. So I was not really dealing with source separation, but source separation is a problem that goes beyond this. So after this, so the type of noise as well is very different. So we have like boats and waves underwater. We have a lot of like environmental sound, engines, cars, traffic, for the above the water domain, let's say the terrestrial animals, and yeah, fortunately there are like lots of data sets out there that have this kind of noise. So in terms of noise, we do have sources that we can work with. And in bioacoustics, what I could find is the detection label. So imagine you know where exactly an instrument sounds, which is a much easier task than separating that instrument. So doing detection, it's a bit better than source separation. Some people will say, like, if you do detection, you already have like some strong priors that you can start where we're doing source separation. So where in my case, when I was working with orchestral music, doing alignment, audio to score alignment, knowing where the the notes are in Indian music, where if you know the raga, you may know also some, or you do the detection of the instrument, let's say the singing voice. You have some strong priors where the instrument that you try to separate is playing. So you can extract from this the noise and the noisy vocalization. And then what people do is to basically mix these two in a random way. So you take like noisy vocalizations and noise, and you mix and you do it like a supervised scenario. And I did this like kind of like big data set of many cross-taxa noisy animal vocalizations and also noise. I use like free sound, urban sound, and then a lot of like bioacoustics data sets, many species, trying to build this kind of like big data repository. It's not exactly like big data. And then I like for benchmarking, I was because you have to benchmark. You need something that can give you either you run experiments, which is expensive, or you have something clean, but you need at least some example that will tell you how good your model is. So I would say evaluation is crucial here. And this is when you have clean targets, people usually do this. So you mix your clean targets with noise and you build your model. What happens when you don't have clean targets? What people did in the past was use out-of-domain clean targets. So this can also work in some cases. You can mix something out of domain, let's say speech, and then you can add a lot of augmentation and mix it with noise that is in domain. So you can add in noise from everywhere, all these boats and cars and wind and waves and so on. And this can also work. Better than this, what people do, they have this noisy target training where you have some, let's say, singing voice of Carnatic music with some leakage from instruments. And I think that was done here at the MTG, no, in some papers. Like try to mix some like stem with bleeding, singing voice with some try to separate it in this way.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So this is another thing, noisy targeting. And another thing which I found to work a bit better is to basically don't start from scratch. We know that, okay, maybe DMAX or I don't know, the splitter, they are not the best. They fail in some cases, but there are some cases in which these work. And if we could like sort the good samples, we could like train only on this good quality sample. So you could feel like a quality filter. We could do this. So we could reuse some existing source separation models. In this case, I use speech, but in your case, I think you can use models from, let's say, Western pop rock music that were trained for singing voice source separation or for some specific instrument to basically give you some priors. For me, these priors, they sounded very bad. So I didn't expect these priors to kind of work. I also did a lot of like test time of augmentation. What does it mean? You do something to your input signal. In my case was pitch shifting, basically time scaling, making it, if you time scale, you pretend that you play it slower, so the pitch goes down and up, but also the tempo goes down, changes at the same time. So if I did that, somehow the frequency was going in the human range, human speech range, and the model started to work better. I don't know if this is the case in music. So if you could like, because these models, they learn strong priors, they will not learn bass at a different frequency than bass is. They'll basically expect bass to be super low. They will expect singing voice to be like this and like that. They will not expect gammakas probably in singing voice. So I would say like doing these test time augmentations I think possibly also in music may get better solutions from pre-existing models. So I call these pseudo clean targets. These are not my final targets. So I'm not evaluating on this. I just use this to train. Of course, not all models can give you good quality pseudo clean targets. What I discovered that when they were trained with the L1 loss is something that makes things look very sparse. So it will rather give silence than being wrong. It will rather be silent than say something wrong. So yeah, this for me, other models that were trained with different kind of loss didn't work so well because they will give you like basically a lot of interference, and this will not lead to a good separation finally after training this. So anyway, the idea is like, how can we obtain these pseudo clean targets? So instead of like noisy targets here, we can use pseudo clean targets. So we get these pseudo clean targets, we train it with noise, and we get like a model with the same kind of like supervised learning kind of scenario. Yeah, there are some technical details. I'll use a lot of augmentation for this to work. Random time scaling in training. So basically, like people do pitch shifting in training. Like also try to see what kind of examples you have. So then you balance your training data set. There's no class or no examples dominating, no sub data sets dominating. There are like some learners, some learning schedulers that really help you generalize better. In your case, I don't know if you need like generalization. Depends what you want to do. I want a domain generalization to be like to have a good model, good at everything. But if you want domain adaptation, that's a different story. Then I think really a validation data set can help you pick the right model. Yeah, I don't know if I should go in this results case. So usually we measure the quality of source separation and signal to distortion ratio. So the higher the better. Usually for speech enhancement, this is around 16 or 18 dB. There is also something that does denoising with a not a machine learning model. It's called noise reduce. This is like the last line in this bar plot now. So I here you have two groups. The first one is the improvement over the metric, means that if the input mixture is already clean and you already, it will give you like a good result already, but you need to measure the improvement over that mixture. This is a more important metric. And then so basically you can train on these noise reduced targets. You can also train on pseudo clean targets, which are the second and the third here. And you can have the noisy target training, which is the second one. So noise reduced it's already very good in many of these examples. I mean, it means in bioacoustics you have the sources are not correlated, which in your case means maybe it's not true. So you don't have a signal processing method, maybe something like NMF that can give you like great separation without any strong priors. However, you can retrain on this and you already get good results. So basically, to sum up these plots is like if you train on pseudo clean targets, something that you obtain with some previous cleaning that you do with a speech enhancement model or something like noise reduced, this can give you better result than noisy target. Second one. I have some examples. I don't know if I should play them. I can skip because I don't. This is not the point of this presentation. I build like a library. So yeah, if you can make things available, data sets, libraries, if you can go beyond it and make it reproducible, that's great. But at least people should be able to use your models. And I think now it's easier than ever. Have a lot of resources there. So I did like a Python package. I had problems as well, so I didn't use any mix-up. Mix-up is like mixing different examples inside the batch, different positives examples, and then you don't deal with the cases where you have a lot of, let's say you have multiple singers singing together, so like a choir, so or two different voices. You will not be able to do that if you don't have mix-up. Of course, when your instrument is very quiet, it is low SNR and you get like worse quality. And there are some cases where it just doesn't work. You have some species or some domain where you need to do some fine tuning. Also, I work at 16 kilohertz, and the way I deal with higher sample rate is I just play the audio slower. So I do this pitch shifting. So what I found as well, this is not published, or probably I won't publish it, but it's part of the library now. What I find is that if I repeat the process again, like I consider these current targets from my actual model as another pseudo-clean targets, I can train it again, the same kind of like mixing noise and these pseudo-clean targets again, and I can basically repeat this process over and over again. And I can also do fine-tuning. I have this generic model here. This creates some, maybe not the greatest denoising or source separation, and I mix it again with some in-domain noise, and I have this fine-tuned model that works for a specific data set. So let's go. Are there any questions on this denoising side?
When you say that this doesn't work on for some species or for certain classes, do you have an idea of which are those and the reason why this doesn't really work for just some of them?
Yeah, there are. Well, I already spotted out some things, like the ones which you have a lot of animals vocalizing together. So because I train mostly on single vocalizations of like single, so let's say it works for singing one singer, but it doesn't work for multiple singers, or it works when you don't have a lot of effects on the voice, but once you add reverb on the voice, it just stops working so well. So it kind of like that. Not so much the noise. I think there's a lot of like audio set and free sound data set and or urban sound, but this gives you a lot of noise diversity. But in terms of animal, there are always going to be some weird case when it will not work. So in that case, you need to like repeat the process on that data set. So again, doing pseudo clean targets, maybe if you can extract some noise, that's great. If not, you can reuse the training noise, which is diverse enough. Yeah. Any other questions? Anyway, so I wanted to like formalize this problem. So the way I thought is like, let's relate it to some existing papers, and also to see how we can apply this in the case of, let's say, non-Western music. Both of these scenarios are characterized by the lack of ground truth. So there's no clean data set for Carnatic music. It's very difficult to get it. Maybe if you can get something, you'll use it as a evaluation data set. However, there are like some existing methods and models for Western music. So you can find that. You can find source separation for the 4-stem scenario always. And there are models, there are like plenty of models, and they're competing, and they have public data sets and also private data sets, which is much larger, and the models, they really scale up with this data. So proprietary models, it's likely that they're going to work much better. And also what you want is to have some signal and some instruction. So this instruction is basically one instrument that you give, or some other signal, or the idea of the instrument. And then you have a transformed signal. So I wanted to formalize this as an inverse problem, because in many cases you want to do bandwidth reconstruction, or you want to do the reverberation, or you want to do some sort of signal enhancement. You want to recover things from, I don't know, any kind of like effect or audio transformation. So if you can already have a model that does something, but for out of domain data, my suggestion here is to use that model. So never start from scratch. There are cases where you will not have this. So there are cases where you need to do unsupervised source creation. So this is one of the papers that does that. They do it not on music, but they do it on I think in speech and other sounds. And it's called the Mixit. So it's from Scott Wisdom. So the way they do it, I mean, in the upper case, you have the traditional scenario where you have your source and the other source, and you create this mixture, and you have the separation model. So this is what they do in speech, because you also have this permutation invariant training, which is for various speakers. What happens when you do this? When you don't have ground truth? When you don't have ground truth, you'll have a lot of mixtures. So you'll have some example with some mixture of sounds, some other examples. What if you build a mixture of mixtures? And your model will train basically to over separate, so to generate basically more stems even than the actual sources that are in these two mixtures together. So this, I think the Mixit works, and Mixit works so well because they do this over separation. So they try to separate many more sources. Many of these will be silent. And then during training, what you'll do is basically learn a mixing matrix. So then you combine, let's say you take this one, oh, sorry. You'll take this one, this one, this one, and this one, and they will mix together to form one source. And the remaining ones will go to the other source. And then the reconstruction loss is basically these two sources with the mixing, multiply with the mixing matrix. So you'll basically measure the reconstruction loss on the original sources. However, in inference, you will not have this mixing matrix, which is built only for training. And then there's like problems, which I discovered in my case, that you will not know which source corresponds, which of the stems corresponds to which source. In many cases, you'll have, let's say, singing voice in two different stems. So yeah, this was great at separating. So I think it learns strong time frequency priors, but it requires a lot of heuristics afterwards to figure out which source is which. And I didn't want that. As a solution, what people do, I find this Omnicep paper in which they basically they do the same thing. They have a network that gives you, here I think they have like 32 different masks, so 32 different sources. How do you combine these sources in one single, let's say, target source? Well, you have a model that can give you some embeddings. So you condition on these embeddings. And how are these embeddings obtained? They can be obtained from an image. Let's say you give a photo of an instrument, or like a text description, child singing, or even a sound. So this is image bind, which gives you this kind of embeddings. They are multimodal, so you can use them for multiple modalities. And basically, this will give you the mixing matrix. And you'll tell you, okay, this first spectrum, this first mask has a low weight, and this other mask has a high weight. And then, yeah, you'll. I think this is a solution to that problem. Anyway, this is in the case where you don't have anything, and you have a lot of data, which is like plenty of mixtures, and you want to do that using those mixtures. There is another continuation of this. So this continuation assumes that you already have a model. So you have a model which is here in blue, And this model, it's out of domain. What does it mean? It means this model is for Western music. So you'll use this model to obtain some, let's say, these are pseudo-clean targets. Now, this is basically what I've shown you before, teachers' noise estimates. And the idea, so that this teacher gives you like noise, like enhancements, denoising, or it gives you two sources. So this is a batch inside your model. So you'll train another model, a student model, that basically learns to separate between random mixtures of these sources. So you'll just take this, you'll create these permutations, and you learn how to separate these random mixtures on the fly. After some time, you'll replace your student with a teacher and repeat the process. So you'll do this over and over again. And I think this method is somehow formalization of what I've done. It's like what I've done can simply fall under this kind of method because you're basically producing always these pseudo-clean targets. There's no quality filter though, so there's like no weight on this saying that, oh, this is a bad separation, I don't want to put it, and this is a good separation, I want to give it like a higher weight during the batch. No, there is nothing like this. There's no sources are excluded, but the idea is like you take these pseudo-clean targets, you build like random mixtures of them, and you train this student model over and over again. And this works. So basically, this is at stage 0, where you basically have your baseline result of your out of domain model. Let's say, oh, I want to apply this to Indian music. At a stage 0, I have this performance, 15 dB. And then I do this pseudo clean target training, this student teacher training, and this improves after 20 epochs to almost 16, and improves and improves. The idea is like there are cases when this can collapse. So after there are some interesting experiments in this paper and some theorems that tell you that okay, it's not for this to work, there are some tricks that you can do during training so that your model doesn't collapse. For me, one thing that I discovered, it does collapse. So sometimes there's like, it's just the representations that you learn with your teacher model do not transfer. And one case was that, okay, any model trained with like non-L1 loss, like L2 loss or SISDR loss, will not transfer well. So they discover some of these tricks, and one of that, you need to add some additional parameters to your student model each time you start a new, let's say, stage. So you allow your student to learn something new each time. So these tricks allows actually the performance to grow rather than stagnating or even like going down. The algorithm is it's like the student knowledge distillation with some random mixing. So you need to get this teacher's estimates, pseudo-clean targets, whatever you want to call them. You remix them randomly. You have student estimates, you compute the loss, and you update the student. And then after a while, you basically switch the student with the teacher. So your trained student will become the teacher, and so on and so on. So I think this is a nice solution for when you have something that works on some domain, Western music, and you don't have something for like not even like clean data, but the representation somehow transfer, even if they transfer poorly at the beginning, they can be adapted. There is another paper that I discussed with Janice recently. This paper goes beyond that. It's called training-free multi-step audio source separation. So this doesn't do anything to the model. This doesn't train anything. What this method does, it's basically take some initial separation. You consider that you have different kind of steps. So you have something that gives you pseudo clean targets. Each T step, it's one of these stages of getting pseudo clean targets from your model. So let's say you take your input, you apply Dmax, singing voice source separation on this. Get a singing voice of Indian music. That it's not really great, but you repeat the process again and again and again and again, and you get this XTs, you get this YTs each time, and you learn basically a way of like separating this by weighting all of these separations. That will basically give you a good solution. So there is a trick here. They search the optimal weights for this model, and somehow they are able to formulate this under the diffusion model. So they basically, what this does is basically a multi-stage kind of like iterative source separation, and this is what in theory also diffusion models do. You know, you have something that's noisy in the inference, no? In the inference, you have something that is very noisy, it gets a bit better, the signal changes, there's some change, some other change. Maybe it gets worse or different, maybe some bins of frequency are distorted and then they disappear and they are added back. But the final goal is that you'll get much better separation at the final diffusion step. So I would say that this kind of like starting from some existing model and some noisy estimations and going iteratively and getting your final prediction, it's like really what diffusion model learn to do. And there are like a few differences in the formalizations we have seen. So a diffusion model like will learn something before that. We will not do this while in the inference. Whereas in this domain adaptation, you will basically update your model to get better at this each time. You know, so it's probably like you basically train your diffusion, you fine-tune your diffusion model while doing diffusion each time. So this will be like one step. So, and whereas this is like step diffusion model, basically step independent. You basically learn your best diffusion while training the diffusion model. You learn the steps while training the diffusion model. This has no step kind of. This doesn't take step t as a parameter, whereas these diffusion models usually take t as a parameter. So yeah, this is the formalization with my explanation with the diffusion model. You have something that you train it, so it goes to noise. Noise is parametric, and you can learn a way to get this back while recovering the clean signal. And the main takeaway is that you can do this iterative denoising and iterative signal transformations, so you can get the desired inverse representation. The way you do it, either by a diffusion model or something like domain adaptation, like Remixy that we've seen. I think it depends on how far your target domain and your source domain are. So I think it remains to be explored, but I have not seen it so much in music, and I have not seen it so much in non-Western music. I think maybe it's a solution that you can take a look at in your case. Yeah, question. We have time, plenty of time to discuss and take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we can start like, is there any question online?
Look at the chat
message. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the examples I can paste it here. So yeah, I have a companion page on this.
Hi, may I ask something? Hi, Marius.
We don't hear you.
You don't hear me?
Maybe. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Give us 1 second because we're hearing you.
Maybe it's my fault.
Yeah.
Now we hear you.
Yeah. Hi, Marius. Lovely to see you and to hear you again. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, and thank you for the talk. It was a bit hard for me to follow, as you know, but since the series is about computational musicology, and let's say any musicologist would like to use a tool, an algorithm for separating any source, and of course just know a little bit of programming in the best case, what would you think would be the first step? Calling you, or if there is any already method that is any method that can be tested with just a few lines of code? Is there what would be the first approach to start using these technologies for someone who don't read math, for example?
Yeah, we have exactly the same problem. So we have biologists are not really great at programming. So the most of the time it takes around for one applied project on biology, you have one biologist on the team and 3 computer scientists. So there's a lot of effort to adapt this method to a given scenario. So in order to like speed up, we created this kind of tool. So I would say now currently the best way is to use some already existing method, which you'll only get pseudo-clean targets. You'll not get the best separation. But if someone develops a method that can be called in the command line to domain adaptation on a given data set, that's already something that they could use, like in a Google Colab with a few lines of code and not like just running some script on taking an archive as an input or a folder on their own computer. That could be a solution, but now I'm not aware of anything like that exists for me. It would be great if there were something like, okay, domain adaptation for your, I don't know, Persian music, or where you can like basically give some cropped examples where your instrument is sounding and some other cropped examples where your instrument is not sounding. Even if those things are noisy, the model can learn on that. That would be great to have. So I think one of these tools is needed for like domain adaptation for non-Western music traditions that can work with minimal programming knowledge.
Yeah, or even for Western, I think I used Splitter. Could it be Splitter is one of the tools, but I don't know if there's been any development thing since then. Thank you, Marisa.
No problem. Thank you for the question. Let's see, there's another question on the chat.
So a question I have is like you were saying like that this domain adaptation is not really well explored in the musical domain. So there's like any approach that was tested on music, or is there something out there? Like is there like anything tested like for source separation on music using domain adaptation?
I have not seen it so much, and maybe it's also it's a more difficult problem. In our case, it's very clear that how are these 2 sources different, and they are very well determined. And if you do unsupervised source separation, they'll also be localized in different parts of the spectrum, and even if they are overlapped, they will not be correlated. So I think in your case, one problem that you have is that the sources are so correlated and they may overlap so much that it becomes an indeterminate problem. So it becomes something that even for some people, perceptually, it will be difficult or it will not make sense to separate. Like I get this question when I was doing orchestral music source separation, like why? Why do you want to separate violins for viola? It doesn't make any sense to separate. They are meant to blend together. Why do you want to separate those? And if you to listen to that, it's perceptually, it's very, very difficult to separate them. Unless they're like doing something that the composer was a bit crazy and it makes no sense sometimes to separate two musical instruments because they are made to blend together. Well, you want to do analysis or you want to finally separate them, no? So, but it's just that the sources are so correlated. Sometimes the problems are very difficult to solve, even for Western music, I would say.
I guess that for that reason, like the program of music source separation has like defined, like most of the source separation research in music has like a predefined set of sources, because then you have like something a little bit more determined to tackle. And that's probably the reason why it's difficult to then maybe perform domain adaptation to other repertoires, for instance, Carnatic music or Chinchu opera, because like you have, I mean, if you are building on top of a splitter which separates drums and bass, and like these are sort of categories that are difficult to relate to other sources in other repertoires, right? That sometimes it's difficult to sort of do even like a mapping between the types.
Yeah, I'm saying that's true, but I still think it's underexplored. Why? Because people what usually do, they use splitter and it doesn't work as well as it works to some extent, I would say. It doesn't work as well as they expect it, and then they throw it out. They say, okay, there's no solution. It's very difficult. What do we do? What the question should be asked is like, what's the best model that could be trained on Western music? So could you do like some really crazy augmentation, like synthesis? Could you transform the singing voice in the MSD DSD dataset so it has some gamma cuts,
Yeah.
And this kind of synthesis get you closer to your target domain, so you can train like an initial model for Western music. Well, not for Western music, but train on Western music that makes it easier to adapt this model for a case where you don't have data. So there's not such question, Second question: what are the let's say test time augmentations that you can apply to a mixture, so you get better separations from an existing model? So could you do something to your mixture, pitch shift it, I don't know, make it noisier, I don't know, could you do something to it that it gives you, apply some filterings, do it like bands wise? So first filters this frequency band, like have like frequency bands kind of filtering. Could you do something to your mixture, then you get better results? And then like all these things, like iteratively try to get like better and better results, see where it collapses, if it collapses, and try to solve this collapsing problem. So it gets better each time. So yeah, these are probably important questions, but I agree, it's like the fact that sources are correlated probably makes it more difficult to do domain adaptation.
There's one question. The mixed model is to separate different speakers, I guess. It's called speak separation, right? So then actually the model kind of, you have a mixture of different speakers, then you have another mixture of different speakers.
Yeah.
So you merge them in 9 speakers, and then you sort of get the 9 speakers separated, right?
Yeah.
Then I wonder if that is applicable to me. I mean, do you think it is applicable to music? Because in the end, you would have 2 mixtures of Carnatic music that would have the same sources on the 2 examples, and then it, like, you would end up grouping them all, right?
No, but I think that method could be a way to obtain one of these model that can transfer to other things. So you can train, let's say, a source separation foundation model. You train it on free sound or free sound plus NSYNC plus everything. It will learn to know how to separate between any kind of like crazy combination of multiple instruments. Not Western music, not forget about this 4-stem paradigm. It will do universal kind of like separation between music instruments in general. And take this model and then go with this model and try to adapt it.
How do you train a model like that can do the universal separation? Like you leave sort of sources like
I mean, there is like you can train it as a mixed kind of paradigm, like or you can do this omnisep. You condition on the label. So you say, okay, I want to get this instrument. I get the embeddings. You condition on the embeddings to get the mask, and then you multiply the mixture with the mask.
Yeah.
But there are cases where you'll find instance of, let's say, a flute, which is clean, less clean flute, and so the idea is to leverage all these other noisy examples, which are many, and use them with the fewer examples that are clean.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. You will not have the perfect scenario ever, but by learning from multiple cases, you may get something that works better, rather than like trying always to have like your own specific data set and domain, have something larger at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like in fact, like I don't know, Jingju and Carnatic music, and they're like very different music traditions from Western music, but they're singing voice, you know, and it should not be like, it's not like a super different. It's a domain shift for sure, but there are like some priors. It's still like a human voice tract reproduction. There are like vocal formants there that you can see in many of the cases. If you get someone that has not seen ever a spectrogram in their life and make them look at spectrograms of Jingju, Carnatic music, and Western music, they will say, okay, this is something similar. This is a singing voice there. So there are like things of the human vocal tract that you can learn from any of these, I think. Yeah, same with the chord instruments, with the reed instruments. There are things you can learn also from Western music.
We're actually perfectly on time, but like, if there's any other questions, even from online.
If I may, to answer Mario, the question I had in mind before asking it was if not having models that extract all the instruments, but these kind of things that are cross-culturally very common, like voice against drums in some extent. So I don't know if the models can be trained for not separating all the instruments, but for just one source of them that could be. Of course, voices changed a lot in different cultures and all timbres and then I don't know if the ensemble in which you're played even though we're searching for the same instrument, we're searching for voice, but maybe the accompaniment makes it extremely hard to separate the same. I don't know, but I think that could be really useful. I think that just having an algorithm that separates voice from the rest could be really valuable in terms of computational analysis. And, and starting from lyrical singing, I think could be, I don't know, just.
Yeah, I think like a start for a nice project would be like to have like this cross-cultural separation of singing voice, whether it's possible to learn something from the domains where the data is plenty, and to transfer this. It's not the idea is to have something for that works for Western music. Is to have something that is trained on Western music and transfers in other domains. Like what things you can do during training this model with Western music data that can transfer well in other domains. Like maybe mix this Western music singing with a lot of instrumentals from other music traditions could be a solution. Yeah, I think I heard there's like a lot of this trend now. People say that diffusion and synthesis will solve this problem. So it will solve source separation problem, because if you can synthesize, then you can really literally train, you can have an infinite amount of sources. However, I think, as I've seen in my case, where if you ask any kind of like diffusion model to generate crow sounds, it will not generate crow sounds. It will generate noisy crow sounds. So if you ask a model to generate a Indian singing voice, it will not generate a clean Indian singing voice. It will generate the other instruments as well, because there's literally no training example in those diffusion models that had clean Indian singing voice. No.
And also, Marius, sorry to interrupt, but one other thing that I tried at the beginning of my PhD was to use the DSP to synthesize violin on top of pitch tracks. So I basically took a data set of Western music like USDB or MetaDB or some of those, and I just computed the pitch tracks for the singing voice, and then I just modified them a little bit with some heuristics of like, to create like these oscillations, alternative music, and I delete it a little bit and stuff, and then I try to synthesize violin on top of that, and I mix it back to the data set. And I thought that it would be like sort of a tradition-informed way of doing that augmentation and improve the task of vocal melody extraction in the presence of an instrument that is melodic and that is sort of shadowing and intertwining the singing voice, and it difficult the task a lot, right? But even the DDSP model was not really able to synthesize a violin that then maps to the actual violin in the real sort of
like
recordings from Carnatic concerts, right? And it worked even worse.
Yeah.
Like it basically destroyed like the integrity of the data, right? And it's because I think that from one side the diffusion models are still noisy for these sort of complicated sources, and neural synthesis is still maybe not able to obtain this sort of real sources that can sort of work as useful augmentation.
Yeah.
But of course there could be ideas on literally inserting real violin into a Western music data set or
there was a paper by I don't know if the Mitsubishi lab, like Jonathan Leroux, or the people at that did Splitter. So what they did, they tried to basically do source separation for Western music, but randomly mix stems. So do augmentations, like randomly mix stems from different songs. And surprisingly to me, that worked, that it had some improvement. So even with, like breaking the correlation realism, let's say, this condition that the sources are always correlated, kind of like work better. So it may be possible that you mix different instruments, that maybe they are not in the same key, or they don't have the same tonic. That works. Yeah.
May I ask a very small question unrelated to this topic, if we have time? You mentioned like a GitHub account of bioacoustic data sets. How does that relate to sound data, for instance? Is a competitor of sound data?
Oh, this no, this is something I did so people can use my training. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, I
so
try to.
An out of the box library itself.
No. Yeah, I even call it like bio-denoising dataset, because this is my training data.
Right. And those are sort of data loaders or
yeah, just scripts to create like my training.
Vale.
But I distribute it as a Python library. It's not like a library itself.
No, out of curiosity, yeah. It sounds really
It's something very simple. Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic. So I think that if there's no more questions, we can close the record.